Now, if you don't know what's been going on, the Ravi Zacharias situation has been heating up lately, and new allegations have continued to surface since his death a few months ago. Now, if you don't know who Ravi was, he was the founder of RZIM, which is, as far as I know, the largest Christian apologetic ministry in the world, and they have some extremely gifted speakers worldwide that excel in apologetics and international evangelism. Sadly, Ravi passed away earlier this year, and you might recall a video that I put together in honor of him a few months back as well. Now, despite Ravi's amazing contributions to the Christian faith, there's been some controversy going on with him that started a few years ago before his death and have been continuing ever since his death. To give a really brief rundown, back in 2017, Ravi was accused of exaggerating his academic credentials by referring to himself as doctor, even though he didn't have a PhD qualification. And in response to that, it was said that in his homeland in India, honorific titles are customary and they're used frequently out of respect for elders. Now, around that same time, Ravi was accused of being involved in an illicit online sexual relationship with a woman in Canada. According to Ravi's account of what happened, the woman sent him unwanted nude photos of herself in order to extract millions of dollars from him. But more recent allegations seem to be challenging that narrative. Also, it's been made public that Ravi owned 3 spas that he would frequently visit due to his back issues. However, since his death, more recent allegations claim that Ravi had made multiple unwanted sexual advances on multiple female employees who worked at the spas. Now, this video is not about whether or not he's guilty. I simply don't know if he's guilty or not. I know that there is an investigation pending and he isn't here any longer to defend himself or to give his side of the story. But if he's innocent, then that's the best case scenario. But for the sake of this video, we're going to go ahead and assume the worst case scenario and discuss this from the standpoint as if he were guilty, because I really do think that there's some valuable insights that everyone can draw and learn from the situation. So first and foremost, if he was guilty of the things that he was accused of, then we should pray for the victims and treat their experiences with great remorse and sadness. We can't and we shouldn't brush them aside simply because we liked Ravi or because he was one of us. If he was wrong, period. Secondly, I didn't know Ravi personally, but if you were to ask me if it was possible that Ravi could have done these things, I would say, of course he could have. Not knowing Ravi, I still know that Ravi was a sinner just like the rest of us. Our culture idolizes people today, and that means that people will idolize people who have larger platforms. And it's almost natural for us to elevate people to places that they simply don't belong and make them icons simply because of their popularity. The same is true in Christian circles. Just because people like Ravi and the rest of us in ministry have Christian platforms, that doesn't make us superhuman or resistant to temptation and sin. In fact, if anything, it might be more of a challenge for us not to fall because of the spiritual dimension that Christian leaders are in. The enemy knows that if Christian pastors and teachers get caught in some sort of awful sin, then as a result, there will be Christian onlookers who start to question their faith, or the on-the-fence non-Christian onlookers. They'll start hearing about these types of things, and some of them will decide that they don't want anything else to do with Christianity. But what most people seem to forget is that the Bible also shows us this potential, and this is why we ultimately shouldn't place fallen humans at the center of our faith. When people drift away from the faith because a Christian leader stumbles, they should remind themselves of all of the great Christian leaders in the Bible who also stumbled and committed some horrible sins. I mean, think about David or Solomon or Moses or Paul and so on. They all had their issues with falling. So it would be dumb of us to think that people like you and me are incapable of falling as well. As the saying goes, pride comes before the fall. And this is why I never get too comfortable in thinking that I'm beyond the point of making some sort of moral mistakes. I know that I always need to be on guard because all of us have the capacity to do some wicked things. My point here is that if the moral failures of Christian leaders cause us to drift away from Christianity, then that means that we need to remove Christian leaders from the foundations of our faith, and we need to replace it with Christ, since Christ is the only one that's morally perfect and the only one that won't let us down. If you place the morality of Christian teachers at the foundation of your faith, then you'll be let down 100% of the time. Yes, we strive for perfection, and by God's grace, we should be growing in character, but nonetheless, we're all still sinners. The core of Christianity is not that we're perfect or that we will be in this life, but that Christ had to be perfect in our place because we simply couldn't be perfect. That's somewhat the theme in the Bible. People keep trying over and over to be moral enough, and they keep failing. The core of Christianity is that we're saved not because we're good, but because we're not. In other words, we aren't saved because of how moral we are, we're saved despite how immoral we are. Not to mention, it isn't popular Christians with platforms that are the reason you're saved, even though that God could have used them in order to help save you. But instead, you're only saved because of Christ and what Christ has done for you. He's the reason that you're saved. And yes, it's also true that Christians ought to be living better lives in this world, and that those of us who teach are going to be held to a higher standard before God. But still, I echo the words of Paul the Apostle. I only want you to imitate me as I imitate Christ. Don't imitate me for who I am. I'm also a sinner who needs God's grace. Now, of course, this doesn't excuse us for the wrong things that we've done and the things that we do, and it doesn't excuse Ravi for what he's accused of doing if he is guilty. But the big point here is that we have to stop looking to men, and we have to stop looking to these pastors and teachers as if they're perfect. The only perfect man to walk this earth came about 2,000 years ago. So if that being said, again, I don't know if Ravi is guilty or not, but if he were, then he was a flawed man. But that still doesn't discredit the exceptional work that he did in revealing the truth about Christianity to millions of people around the world. If Christianity is true, which of course I believe it is, then it doesn't simply become untrue simply because Ravi committed those sins. It also doesn't mean that his arguments and the reasons that he gave for the truth of Christianity somehow become less true or false just because of the things that he did wrong. Truth will always remain the truth, no matter who says it. I don't care if it was El Chapo. If he claimed that Christianity was true and he gave sound arguments for the existence of God, then it would still be true, and his arguments and the reasons he gave would still be valid, despite how morally awful his life has been. Now, unfortunately, guilty or not, Ravi's legacy will be affected by these accusations. And let this be a lesson to all of us that are in leadership to be careful. And let this be a lesson to all of those not in leadership to not place your trust in men, because they will always let you down. Instead, only place your trust in the only perfect one to walk this earth, Jesus Christ. Both Ravi Zacharias and Nabil Qureshi were advocates against the teachings of Islam, and both have since passed away. And in wake of this, some Muslims have claimed that they were cursed by Allah. Now, is that so? Well, go ahead and click on this video to see why they're mistaken. And the next time that you find yourself placing far too much trust in finite men, what are you going to say?
What do you mean?